We all make mistakes in the beginning, middle, and end stages of a game, and simple solution is to simply just start over, right? Well, that can't really be said for Genshin. Once you make a mistake, you live with that mistake. Unless you want to create a new account. I made tons of mistakes when I started playing Genshin, and over the years have come across different resources and tips that made me a little more conscious about what decisions I make, so I don't fluff myself over and make sure I make the best out of my account. Besides beginners, these tips might be able to apply to veteran players too. I've compiled 21 tips and resources that I wish I had when I started playing Genshin that I hope are of use to those who are getting started with Genshin or for those who are veteran players and just want some resources. With that being said, let's get right into it. Use build guides. When I first started playing Genshin, I had no clue how to build any of my characters. I didn't know Xiox existed, I didn't know Braxophone existed, I didn't even know Game 8 existed. But now that I do know, use them. The build guides that I follow are all from Game 8, which is a site that I use for every single character that I decide to pull for, and then keep track of what build I'm going for in my Notion so I don't have to keep coming back to the website. If you want more explanation or what exactly something does, or prefer listening instead of reading, I would recommend checking out both Xiox and Braxophone on YouTube. For a long while, I actually use a combination of both them and Game 8, and the information always lines up. Both Xiox and Braxophone do well with explaining what the character's talents do, if getting constellations are worth it, build showcases, etc. And overall are super informative if you're lost on how to build your character. In the previous version of Genshin 4.4, they did add a new option where you can essentially auto-build your character or quick build them, and it will choose the best artifact in each category for that character. However, I wouldn't lean specifically on this option since this edition is still fairly new, and I would instead be using Game 8, Xiox, and Braxophone as they all update their build guides in the instance a character has been nerfed, buffed, or etc. Don't build too many characters at once. I said this in my last video about Genshin Burnout, which if you haven't checked out, then make sure you do. But building too many characters in the beginning stages can be very daunting, and the process of building even a single character is time consuming. I had issues with simply pulling a character and then wasting resources on characters that I ended up never playing or didn't have anything for, etc. And they ended up just sitting on my account, and because their build was so bad, it made me not want to come back to them. Instead, focus on a set amount of characters. Some recommend that you only focus on building 4 characters, a main DPS, sub-DPS, and 2 supports, and some recommend choosing 7 or 8 characters you really want to build. But Anna, didn't you just say not to build so many characters? Yes, I did. But when I say too many characters, I mean if you have 15, for example, characters and you're trying to build every single character. The problem with that is wasting adventure experience, mora, as well as some characters using the same materials that you have to do double the amount of farming for. So if you want to build more than 4 characters, I would say no more than 7 or 8 that are different elements and weapons, so you kind of have a well-rounded set of characters. For example, you need a claymore user but don't have one built because you didn't include them in the initial 4 or 7, or a better pyro character for puzzle use or has a better taunt that's more effective against enemies, etc. But this is to make sure you don't end up wasting materials in the long run, which brings me to my next tip. Don't waste your materials. Genshin is one of those games where you have to be very particular about a lot of things. You have to be conscious about the amount of materials you're using, how much mora you're spending, etc. There are plenty of people out there who spend all their mora and adventure experience on a character just to end up never playing that character. If you want to go ham with spending mora and adventure experience or crystal chunks, then make sure you have some to spare. Now, some people don't mind just using whatever they have and then going to farm, but the thing that you have to remember is that farming takes a long time, especially when you're trying to rack up for future characters. So be conscious about the materials you're using and think about if you're going to utilize that character or not. And if you aren't, then wait, farm some more, then come back to the character when you have the materials to spare. Never use your primogems on the standard banner. This is a huge rule in the Genshin community. If you didn't already know, never use your primogems on the standard banner. Only use the free acquaint fates you get from leveling up your AR level, the mail, etc. on the standard banner. The reason why this is such a heavy tip is because the standard banner will always have the same 5 stars, and if new 4 stars come out, it will update to have the new 4 stars after a version ends, and there isn't really an uprate for anything. Even if you only need one more wish for a 10 pull and have the primogems for it, don't do it. Simply wait until you get a free blue fate from whatever gives it to you in the game and save those primogems for the limited banner, or the weapons banner if you're insane. Do not build pity and be careful when wishing for 4 stars. This isn't really controversial, but I think a good portion of the community agrees. Do not build pity, and this goes both ways, so whether you are guaranteed or you're not. The reason why people say not to build pity is because the same 10 wishes you make now on a character's banner you don't want are going to be the same 10 wishes you make on a character's banner that you actually do want. Building pity is never a good idea and never really has been because there isn't such thing as building pity, quote unquote. And I've seen people on Reddit say stuff like, I was building pity on I'll Hate Them's banner and now I have him and didn't want him and now I gotta get my pity back up for Nahita's banner that's coming next. That's just an example, but you went on the banner of a character you didn't want to, quote unquote, build pity, and now your pity is reset because you actually got the character. Why wish on the banner in the first place? That I'll Hate Them could have been the Nahita you wanted if you had simply just waited. For some, they lose the 50-50 and are guaranteed. That might be a blessing in disguise because you're now guaranteed the character you actually want, but I've seen people actually get mad because they got the character on the banner whilst building pity. But again, why were you wishing on that banner if you didn't want them? You could have waited and saved. This and the next tip I'm combining, but you need to be extremely careful when wishing for 4 stars. I get the rate for 4 stars is higher for whatever the 3 are on the limited banner, but let's take when I wanted Gaming. Out of the 50 plus times I wished for Gaming, I only got 2 Gamings, and that was him and his constellation, with the others being mostly Farazan and 4-star weapons. And also when trying to wish for a specific 4-star, you're increasing the chance of getting either the 5-star on the banner or a non-limited 5-star. So do you really want to risk getting the 5-star or a non-5-star for a 4-star character? Some people, yes. Maybe because they don't care about the 5-star and will just buy Genesis crystals, or they desperately want the 4-star and are okay getting the 5-star or non-5-star. It depends, but if you're gonna wish for the 4-star on the limited banner, just be prepared to possibly get a 5-star in the process, whether it be an early 5-star or a late one. Pre-farming. This is just me, and not everyone is like me, but I do not like to pre-farm for brand new characters. I saw someone today who was already nearly done farming for Arlecchino based off of a leak when she's not gonna be out for a whole nother version, and materials are always subject to change, as well as the fact that some bosses that a new character might need are not going to be available until that version with the character starts. If you want to pre-farm regardless, then go for it, I can't stop you. But there have been enough instances when some of those leaks have been incorrect and some people have ended up farming for a character that never came in the next version. For example, I kept hearing leaks for the last 5 versions that Albedo was getting a rerun from 4.1 to 4.4, and he never got one until 4.5 with the new wish system. Before every version, it was Albedo is suspected to get a rerun that version, and he never did. Some people farm for a character 5 versions before the character is even announced based off leaks, and I don't like doing that because again, materials are subject to change before the character is released to the public. I would suggest farming for the character when the character is actually released if you are like me and don't like leaks. If you must pre-farm and you're not sure if you'll get the character or you are guaranteed, then farm for general materials. For example, if you're not guaranteed and don't know if you'll win the 50-50, farm for universal materials. When I say this, I mean talent books, mora, and even shards, since we will always at least know what element the character is when they are announced. Farm for materials that can be used on anyone if you lose the 50-50 on the character you actually want. If you're guaranteed, I still recommend doing the same thing of farming for universal materials because you're going to need them anyway for that guaranteed character, and then waiting to farm for the local specialties and boss materials, etc. When it comes to weapons, sometimes for Genshin, some characters, their weapon is in their concept art. For some, it's not. So if you're unsure what weapon they will be using, then wait. There's still no word on what weapon Arlecchino is using. Some say polearm, some say sword, and in my case, since I have a swords only gameplay, which you should also totally check out that series, I would hate to skip over Albedo or Kazuha's banner for Arlecchino and then find out she's a polearm user. Sometimes the stuff I know is not because I was looking for the leaks, but it's because people will talk based off of the leaks, and you should be looking at the comments and suddenly see that a character is suspected to be this weapon or this element and use these things, etc. Take this tip as you will, because some people like pre-farming and will do it regardless if the leak is correct or not. But just be aware that materials are always subject to change before the release of a character, and the only people who have access to those servers to test characters before release are those who are actual true Genshin content creators and live, breathe, and eat Genshin for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Keep track of things in Notion. This tip would apply to those who like to be very organized about their gameplay and need to make sure they have a proper visual about everything that you're doing in the game. You don't have to use Notion, but it's what I prefer and it's satisfying to look at. But if you like to stay organized, then create a Notion or Google Excel, etc. and keep track of your character builds, weekly bosses, if you've done daily and weekly tasks, etc. I have 2 videos on my channel that outlines how I use Notion for Genshin, so definitely check those out. And there are plenty of other people on YouTube who also have videos on using Notion for Genshin. Again, I would recommend this to people who like keeping together what is available on what days if they farmed ore, dailies, and weeklies, and having a to-do list of things they need to do. I keep mine as organized as possible and add a new character whenever I decide I want to build a new character or gain a new character, want to build them, etc. I am in full control of my Notion, and this is what I like about my Notion, and the organizational aspect of keeping track of my Genshin accounts makes me happy, even when I don't feel like playing. So again, do this if you want to have full organizational control of your Genshin account. Farm ore, mora, and adventure experience at least a few times a week. I think this is a good tip because you're going to need these materials for every character no matter what, and you're going to run out eventually if you're constantly leveling up characters. If you don't have time for much but really need to farm, I would farm at least one of these things a few times each week. So if you're not playing much, you have at least been grinding, so when you do want to wish for a character and do get said character, you're good to go on mora, or as well as the adventure experience. Agile and condensed resin. In Genshin, from events, leveling up, gameplay, etc., you will receive fragile resin. What it is that it gives you 60 resin per 1 fragile resin. So if you convert 2 fragile resin, you'll get 120 resin in return. Condensed resin converts the normal resin into condensed resin, but gives you double the rewards when farming artifacts, mora, or adventure experience ley lines. However, you can only carry a max of 5 and it costs 40 resin plus 1 crystal fly. These are typically good if you don't really have much time to farm, but you want to get it out of the way quickly, and like I said, get double the materials. If you aren't going to play Genshin for the day as in actively trying to farm and such, then simply do your commissions and convert your resin to condensed resin and allow your regular resin to replenish. Then if you decide you want to farm the next day, you have a full 160 resin plus 4 condensed resin, since you typically only can craft 4 from 160, and you can use some of the resin from the replenished 160 to make 1 more if you want a total of 5. Now the real question is, when should you use your fragile resin? Some say you should wait until around rank 45 to use your fragile resin, simply because the chance of getting higher quality materials, but that may vary from person to person. Depending on the account, I might have a lot of fragile resin stacked up, so I might use a few here and there, but don't use all of them before hitting rank 45. So when you're artifact farming for those characters you really want to invest in, you don't have to worry about running low on fragile resin and regular resin. It's a long process to artifact hunt, so that's why it's helpful to save as much fragile resin as you can up until that point. Create a schedule. This is again for people who like organization and scheduling. Set a schedule for what days you want to farm mora, experience, characters, and weapons. If you don't want to play every day, then maybe just schedule a couple of things in each week, but do something different each week. In my other video, I said lessen the amount of days you play if you constantly feel burnt out when you're playing every day. But if keeping a schedule and organizing it and such keeps you motivated to play because you get stuff done and marking it off, then go for it. Like I said before, I keep my Genshin Notion very organized to keep track of everything, so then if I haven't played in a while, I am aware of the last things I was doing so I can continue with what I was doing. If you don't like organization or scheduling, then simply play when you feel like it and when you have time. Do your commissions and weeklies. If you absolutely do not have time for Genshin but still want to get a little gameplay in each day, then definitely do your weeklies and commissions. You get 60 primogems a day, which on a normal 31-day month is 1,800 primogems a month, which isn't too shabby. And those weeklies, not including bosses, since if you don't have time or don't want to fight bosses, the weeklies can include bounties, requests, and working on your reputation and using the transformer to convert excess materials you have. Remember when doing the bounties and requests that if you do it in one region, it does it for all regions. So, to clarify, if you decide to do Liyue one week, you've maxed your bounties and requests for that week and can't do it for another region until the next week. So if you really want to increase your reputation for Inazuma, then only do requests and bounties in Inazuma. Don't ascend until your characters are ready. Whenever you reach a certain AR, you will not be able to get to the next AR level until you do an ascension quest. Upon completing the Ascension quest, you will ascend to the next level and the world level increases. The level of bosses increase, the quality of drops increases, and you will be able to attempt other domains such as talent domains since those don't open until a specific AR level. Now when I started playing Genshin, they didn't make the changes to the Ascension domain that they have made now. So the Ascension quest actually used to be harder, as well as at the end you had to fight an Electro Hypostatus. They have since changed that, so now it's easier, so if you are a new player, it's easier for you to attempt the Ascension quest. Which I get, but I also think it's a dumb change because it's less challenging. Now, like I said, when you ascend, your world level increases, so everything around you is going to increase in level. So if your characters are not prepared to take on, for example, level 85 enemies, then do not ascend until your characters are where they should be. I will link in the description below what to keep up where my characters are before I ascend them. I use an ascension/level guide. What this shows is what, depending on what AR you are, it shows you what level your character should be, what level their weapon should be, what level their artifact should be, and what level the talent should be. This is extremely helpful when you're not sure what direction you should be taking next with your characters. This little guide also exists for Star Rail as well. Now in 4.5 they added a new feature that is called the Training Guide. It helps you keep track of the characters, level, artifacts, and weapons. It does not tell you the materials and such you need, but more so kind of gives you an overlook of the overall build of your character and whether or not you need to level them up to the recommended level, recommended weapon and level, and recommended artifacts that will work better for the character. Since it doesn't necessarily keep track of like everything, for me, I would use this scarcely. Simply use the Ascension guide I mentioned and the build guides from Game 8, Xiox, and Braxophone, and you'll be perfectly built for the Ascension quest in no time. You really don't want to ascend if your characters are underleveled just because of the fact that it'll be harder to kill enemies for the higher level materials, etc. So I recommend you get your characters to the max they can be before you ascend. Don't forget about the teapot. When you finish the Liyue storyline, you will have a new side quest available where you can get the Serena teapot. It's a pretty easy way to build companionship for characters, as well as being able to decorate the place to your liking and farm for resources. Do not forget about it. Check on it from time to time because the more you increase the teapot level, it grants you tons of resources, including primogems. So if you want another way to get primogems, well, here you go. I forget about the teapot a lot, so don't be like me and actually take advantage of the stuff you get from it. Reminder that you'll only increase in level when you make a piece of furniture for the first time, so if you have the materials and a bunch of furniture you've never created, you could easily go up a level or two. To add on, the higher your teapot level, the more furniture you can create at a time. Also, in terms of dailies, if you want, add on to check your teapot at least once a day for companions, teapot currency, as well as purchasing the vial of Adepti Speed. The Adepti Speed is a good thing to buy or hoard because it instantly creates whatever piece of furniture so you don't have to wait 10 plus hours. If you're like me, I will collect a bunch of vial of Adepti Speeds and then go on a mass furniture creation and end up going up a few levels in one day. When your level is higher, it will take more furniture to increase the level, so be aware of that. Don't worry about artifacts and talents early game. You might be tempted to try farming for artifacts for your characters early game. Don't. Because you will not get the artifact sets your characters actually need until much later AR levels, and the chance of getting a 5-star artifact is not until rank 45. Now, if you want to farm for artifacts to funnel into the artifacts you'll use in the future for the sets you actually will use, then if you really want to farm the artifact domains, then only use regular resin. Don't use any fragile resin. This is what I do since I want to gather as many artifacts as I can, but still don't use the fragile resin to do it. You also can farm around each region and get artifacts from chests, and if you're big on exploration like I am and are constantly opening chests, you'll have plenty of artifacts in no time. You cannot farm for talents until rank 35, so if you have regular resin to spare, you can go for and farm the books until you've got enough to last you 10 years. Kidding. But I say this because if you have a ton of 2-star talent materials, then you won't really have to worry about anything when converting them into the books you actually need. The same rule applies to this as well. Don't use your fragile resin for it. In early parts of the game, you won't have access to much until your AR level is higher, so what I do is I'll put random sets on my characters, but they have the stats my characters need. So for example, if my character needs attack percentage on the goblet, I'm not going to care about what set it is, I'll just make sure they have an attack percentage goblet. Then eventually we'll get the set they need, which we then can use the placeholder artifacts to level up the actual I can't speak. We can use the placeholder artifacts to level up the actual artifact sets we need. Some people are completely against farming talents and artifacts before certain levels and to only focus on Mora and experience ley lines, but you're gonna need everything eventually, and it's best to do it early when you have some spare resin. Again, don't use your fragile resin until you're farming for the good stuff. The Battle Pass. The Battle Pass can be useful for getting resources as well, and the max level is 50. You can get Battle Pass experience by doing daily task, weekly task, and tasks from events. In my experience, I think the highest level I've gotten was 30, and that's because I don't really focus on the Battle Pass besides my dailies and possible weeklies. For the events, I play the events to get whatever primogems or free skin, character, or weapon, and then stop. But I'm sure there are free-to-play ways to entirely complete the Battle Pass every 40 days. Now, if you don't mind spending a little money, then you can go for the upgraded Battle Pass. You get extra Mora, talent books, weapons when you reach a certain level, etc. The only thing about the Battle Pass is that you'll have to play very often to get the most out of it if you spend money on it, since once it resets, you'll have to purchase it again. Also, don't get whatever the other tier of that Battle Pass is, the one where you get the furniture and the card. The $9.99 one is perfectly fine for those that don't want to spend too much money. The Welkin Moon. Another way to get primogems is the Welkin Moon. This is good for people who want a little extra in their pocket on top of the daily commissions. If you want to be a low spender and don't want to spend money on Genesis crystals, I would recommend the Welkin Moon. It's only $4.99 a month and you get 90 primogems per day plus 300 Genesis crystals when you buy it, which you can save or convert to primogems. By checking in every day, that's 90 primogems for 30 or 31 days, which equates to 2,700 primogems a month on top of the daily commissions. So if you don't mind spending money, I recommend it. I get it sometimes, but not all the times. Note that if you miss a day, you won't get the 90 primogems for that day or an extra day, so it's important that you try to sign in at least once a day. I like to do this if I need a little extra primogems before a character comes out or a rerun happens. So for example, let's just say we have a whole month for this version, so let's just say that, for example, Kazuha is going to have, or I guess not Kazuha, but let's just say Arlecchino. I would probably get the Welkin Moon now so I can rack up as many primogems as I can to get closer to being able to get Arlecchino. I decided I was going to wish for Arlecchino on my guaranteed main EU account just because of the fact that I have pretty high pity on there and I didn't really want Chiori. So I'm actually going to be skipping this version entirely just for Arlecchino and probably just either get the Welkin Pass or using Genesis crystals, since at that point I've been spent money on that account and it's obvious that I have. Exploration and character farming. One of the most taxing activities in Genshin is exploration and character farming. It takes forever, and for character building, a character may never be perfect. But what if I told you there was an easy way to keep track of your exploration and farming routes? In come the Genshin interactive map. On the Hoyo Lab website, the site provides an interactive map that is connected to your Hoyo account. I definitely recommend this site because when you want to go on an exploration fetch, you can go to whatever part of the region on the interactive map and select what you want to show on the map. So if you want to search for chests, you could go and show chest only and it will show you every chest in the entire game, and so on and so forth for puzzles, oculuses, etc. And when you find something, you can mark it as found and it hides it. Well, I won't say hides it, but it grades it out to, show that you found that item. It's extremely helpful for those like me that want 100% on every region. The map also includes farming routes for all local specialties, enemies, etc. So you can farm efficiently and get as much as you can for each character that you're farming for. Just make sure that you select what character you want, and then it will outline what materials they use, and then select whichever material you need, and it will show you where those materials are. So take advantage of this. This site is extremely wonderful. I wish I was using this when I started because nothing is worse than finding the site in later stages of the game, but not knowing what you found and haven't found. NPCs. Believe it or not, some NPCs actually give you stuff. For example, in the church, there is a sister that if you ask if there's anywhere good to go in Mondstadt, she gives you a 4-star artifact. Can't guarantee the stats are good, but it's an example. Definitely do a Google of all NPCs in Genshin that gives you an item and you'd be surprised on what you miss out on. Find the oculuses as soon as possible. I recommend finding the oculuses when you reach each region as soon as possible, just because constantly running out of stamina is going to be very annoying. By leveling up the statues, you're increasing your max stamina, getting adventure experience, and also getting primogems. In later regions such as Inazuma, Fontaine, etc., there are way more oculuses, so the rewards are slightly higher. You'll instead get at least 60 primogems, as well as a shrine of death keys, increase your max stamina, and sometimes even a constellation for the traveler. This should be one of the first things you do when you encounter a new region. Max out every tree in each region. Each region has a tree. Dragonspine with the Crimson Wish tree, Inazuma with the Sacred Sakura tree, and so on and so forth. I recommend maxing these trees out over time since it does take a long time for some, but doing so nets you a plethora of awards, including blue and pink wishes. Like I said, it takes time to do, but the Sacred Sakura tree, the Fountain and Fontaine, etc. use sigils, so if you're constantly finding chests, then some may even be able to completely max out a tree in a day, but take time since if you're not actively exploring, it will take some time to max them out. And lastly, be careful who you allow into your world. Everyone knows Genshin is a co-op game, but you also have to be aware of the people you allow in your world and when joining other people's world. There have been many cases where people steal materials or are rude or trying to scam folks, so make sure you set your own rules for when people come to your world. If they do not ask to farm something and take without asking, without you saying they can take what they want, etc., then kick them out. You might need those materials and now have to wait 3 days or have to farm in someone else's worlds. When joining other people's worlds, make sure you ask before doing anything to make sure you have permission to do something. If they ask for help with something, then help them, and in exchange, they may allow you to farm for something, assuming that they don't need it. If they need it, don't take it and say thank you, have a good day, and leave and try someone else or wait until your resources replenish. It's all about being kind to one another, and since the internet is hiding our face, anyone will say or do anything to hurt other people. So don't be a jerk, and if someone is being a jerk in your world, report them, block them, kick them out, and move on. I think that's all the tips I have for now. If there's any more tips you have, then definitely make sure to comment them and help fellow veteran and new players at Genshin. I hope you guys have a great day or night. Bye!